May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. About 2 years ago, when I first joined this church, I decided I would read a chapter of the Bible every night. I started from Genesis and continued faithfully to read the chapters every night. Sometime after that, I joined the lay preachers training session led by Pastor Sarah. Our first assignment was to choose 2 Bible readings, one from the Old Testament and the other from the New, that we would use for our training and write a sermon about. I had a few New Testament readings in mind, but I really couldn't think of anything from the Old Testament that I wanted to use. I didn't have an Old Testament Bible verse that stuck out in my memory. Sure, I remember several of the old stories I learned as a child in Sunday school, but I wouldn't be able to tell you which chapter or what book of that story came from in the Bible. So the Saturday night before the Sunday where we had to share our selected readings, of course I always wait to the last minute on these things, the chapter in the Bible from my daily readings for that day was Joshua chapter 1. When I finished, I knew that this was going to be my Old Testament reading that I would use to write my sermon. When you heard the reading earlier, you may be thinking, what was so special about this reading? Why would he think that this was something exceptional to write a sermon on? Well, for me, it really had an impact. And I was excited to tell the group that this was the reading I selected. The next day, when each of us shared with the group the Bible readings we would use, Pastor Sarah was a little surprised when I said a chapter from Joshua. She said she thought that was a lot to take on for her first sermon. I didn't quite understand what she said. Joshua chapter 1 didn't seem that difficult. However, over the next few days, I understood what she was talking about when I read further into Joshua. It seemed like I was reading more chapters from the Game of Thrones than chapters of the Bible. So we'll leave that for another day. I need many more lessons on lay preaching before I could take on a discussion about that. It's better to leave to the professional theologists like Pastor Sarah. So let's get back to chapter 1 of Joshua and why it had such an impact on me. I think part of the reason it is easier for us to relate to people in the Bible, such as the famous characters of Moses and Joshua, Adam, John the Baptist, and others, as they are so familiar to us. Not just from the Bible, but from their characters and stories have been developed into mainstream movies, TVs, or even Broadway musicals. So even though if you aren't a faithful Jew or Christian, most people have some idea of what these people were and what they did. So as we read the Bible, it might be easier for us to relate to them and understand what they're thinking as we have their background stories more than what is actually written on the pages. The day before Joshua chapter 1, I had read Deuteronomy chapter 34, which is the death of Moses. There, verse 9, it said, Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with wisdom, because Moses had appointed him to be his successor. The people of Israel obeyed Joshua and kept the commands that the Lord had given through Moses. Then it continues in chapter 10 through 12. There has never been a prophet in Israel like Moses. The Lord spoke with him face to face. No other prophet had done miracles and wonders like those the Lord had sent Moses to perform against the king of Egypt, his officials, and the entire country. No other prophet has been able to do great and terrifying things that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. I couldn't help but think how Joshua must have been feeling at that time. His dear friend and mentor, someone I'm sure he respected and honored very much, had just passed away. And now he is the successor, the person who had to fill Moses' shoes. Joshua had to be grieving over Moses' death still, feeling sorry that his dear friend could not go into the land that the Lord had promised the people of Israel. At the same time, he must have felt lonely, nervous, and scared. and he was expected to take over from Moses and lead all these people. He must have been wondering if he would be able to do this. Would the people accept him, trust him, and follow him the same way they did Moses? After all, as it said in the Bible, no other prophet has been able to do the great and terrifying things that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. It wasn't an easy task that he had before him. The story didn't end here. It wasn't as if they reached the promised land and it was an empty oasis that the people of Israel were able to move into and live happily ever after. Joshua was going to have to lead the people and conquer the kings and nations that were the current inhabitants at the time. Joshua had to have his doubts if he was going to be able to do as Moses has done before him. It was not only something Moses had passed to Joshua, but God himself commanded Joshua to conquer Canaan. The Lord spoke to Joshua and told him to get ready and cross the river Jordan into the land he had given them. He told him no one will be able to defeat him as long as he lives. God said, "I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will always be with you. I will never abandon you. Be determined, be confident, for you will be the leader of these people. Just be determined, be confident, and be sure you obey the whole law that my servant Moses gave you. Do not neglect it, and you will succeed wherever you go. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for I am the Lord your God, and I am with you wherever you go." And God confirmed this. As they went to cross the river Jordan, God parted the river the same that he did to Moses. What better affirmation can you get if you're feeling worried about if you're the right person for the job? Hearing that what God said to Joshua is why I found this reading so special. God knew how Joshua was feeling, and I found that he said to him was so beautiful. The words that a caring father would say to their child when they are feeling sad, lonely, or scared. He said to Joshua, "As long as you follow me, you will succeed wherever you go." I think that is a consistent message throughout the Old Testament and the relationship between God and the people of Israel. Things went well when the people followed the Lord, but whenever they lost their way, they turned away from God and decided to do things on their own. Things didn't always go well for them during those times. I myself have experienced that. I worked hard and was successful and made a good life for myself. But as time went on, other things became a priority and more important to me. And my religion and faith were maybe still there in the background, but I really didn't have a relationship with God anymore. It was never completely gone, but not one of my priorities. Like the people of Israel, I too lost my way and got involved in things I shouldn't have. And I hit an all-time low. Similar to Joshua, I was feeling lonely and scared. I had nobody to talk to. I was alone. And although God didn't talk to me directly, like he did to Joshua, I remembered that I am not alone, that God will always be with me. And even though I had abandoned him, he had not abandoned me. So I reached out to him once again. At the time, he was the only one I could talk to. I renewed my relationship with him again, and he brought me to this wonderful church and congregation. So on that Saturday night, when I read chapter 1, and I heard those beautiful and inspiring words that God said to Joshua, I knew he was speaking to me and wanted me to share them with you. As I said in the beginning, I'm not very good at remembering where stories and readings are located in the Bible, but this one is easy. Joshua chapter 1. We all have times when we are grieving or worried, scared and alone. There are times when we are thinking we can't take anymore, that everything is going wrong. We all have times when we absolutely need to hear that God will always be with us, that he will never abandon us, that we should be confident and determined. In those times, remember Joshua chapter 1.